Welcome back, viewers, listeners. Excited to have you with us once again. Another segment, Business Leadership Experts. And in this particular segment, I tell you what, if you've been living under a rock as a business owner, not even a business owner, if you have not heard that our economy is heading for another big recession. All right. Now, we here at Business Leadership Experts, Temple Executive Coaching, we're not making a declaration one way or another. We're not economists. That's not our gig. But what we are as advisors, it is on us to make sure that our clients as business owners recognize and prepare. If they want to prepare, perfect. If they don't think there's a need, you can't make somebody do something they don't want. So in this segment, Donna Febus, our virtual CFO at Temple Executive Coaching, she and I are going to be sharing some of the strategies that we've been working with our clients during this particular period of time. And we're hoping that we're getting to some of these things prior to the recession. So first, what we'd like to do is to go over some 4 areas that we've been paying some attention to. And then what we're going to do is go back after we give you the list of the 4 points. Then we're going to go back and cover each one of them a little bit more in depth. So Donna, as virtual CFO, what are some of the 4 areas that you and your clients have been focusing
on? Sure, Mike. First of all, it's good to be back. I feel like it's been like forever since we, did one of these podcasts. So I'm glad to, be back to do this. Because they're fun, right? So the 4 areas that I like to focus on with my clients in a particular period like this, or even, outside of a recession, because it's always relevant. The first one would be, so working with your strategy and what your plan is with your clients. And I know that that's a big one that you work on also. So that would be the first one. And now the other ones kind of go into a little bit more of that, but you also want to look at these particular next 3 points individually, and then kind of like as a whole, so mesh them all together. So number 1, know your numbers. 2, inventory control, and then debt versus cash. Those are 3 areas that I really focus on with clients to help them to gain an understanding and bring clarity to, what their numbers look like, kind of where they're at, and any changes that we need to make to assist them with getting through this. So it's kind of like, it's not really a COVID kind of situation, but it's kind of the same thing. You're preparing for something that may or may not happen. It could hit us tomorrow. So you're proactively being prepared. And so let me go to the first point, and that was knowing your numbers. So when I say know your numbers, and you hear about me, you hear me talking about this all the time. It's like a broken record. It's like Donna's always talking about knowing your numbers, We're going to talk about it again today, just FYI. So get ready. So you need to know your revenue, right? You need to know your expenses, and you need to know it on a monthly basis. You agree? All right.
Yes.
All right. So the best way to stay on top of your numbers is using your annual budget. And so when you have your annual budget, you have it on a month by month basis. So you have it broke down based on, previous budgets, so that you kind of have an idea of where you're at. And once you have it in place, then you do a review of it on a monthly basis. So that helps you stay on track. And by that, just let me give you an example real quick. So let's say that you are looking to make a 12% net profit at the end of the year. Okay. So by using this budget on a monthly basis, you're going to know whether or not in real time, if you're going to, where you're going to be in regards to that 12%. So you'll be tracking the areas, that all go into affecting whether or not you're on track to achieving that 12% net profit goal. You'll be able to immediately see what areas that you might need to review and look a little bit deeper into and understand maybe why they're so far off. so that you can make adjustments now versus at the end of the year when it's too late. And that helps you to bring it back in line so that you can stay on that track. So it gives you that immediate clarity on your profit and loss for any given period that you're looking at.
Right. So what Donna is also bringing to light here is that when you have your data and numbers don't lie, right? So, I've worked with clients before in the past. And by the way, when we do hit a recession, and I've advised clients through a recession, people become more emotional, and they kind of at times they'll freeze, they'll shut down. They start trying to get a handle as to what's going on. Tell me, leaders, you haven't had this conversation, or a leader hasn't had this conversation with you. Kind of walking around, going from department to department, person to person, asking them, so what do you think? How do you think we're doing? And you'll get one department that says, well, it looks like we might be okay. Another department, completely different, point of view. Well, I don't know. I don't think we're going to make it. If you have your budget, and if you, like Donna's saying, and you're able to track your data on a monthly basis, remember, your profit and loss statement's too late. Okay. At the end of the year, if you're reviewing your budget on a monthly basis, even a weekly basis, tracking your data, it takes the emotion out of it. All right. You've got to have those tough conversations with some of your departments or with yourself. And what she's saying is that if we're off track in a particular area, what can we do? We're not looking to shame anyone, but what can we do to get ourselves back on track on a proactive manner? That's a good point, Donna. Thank you. Well, some organizations have at least how many? 2 components of revenue. I remember you taught me this, right?
Yeah.
There's 2 components of revenue. Do you remember what those are? You taught me.
Excuse me. Yeah. So you have, reoccurring revenue, and then you have new revenue. So your reoccurring revenues are subscriptions, contracts, repeat customers that you have. New revenue would be just that. It's new revenue, and it can come from new customers. It can also come from new products or services that you're, taking to market. So with that said, and going back to the budget and what you mentioned about working with your departments. So the areas that you should typically budget in, and involve in a budget are any of your working departments. So like finance, sales, marketing, HR, IT, operations. So, if you're a manufacturer, it'd be production, repairs, the maintenance department, that type of thing. And a lot of companies would have R&D. So what you do is you would meet with your department heads and iron out what exactly is needed. And you do this, prior to the new year starting, so that you have enough time to go through and, okay, this is what everybody wants. So now let's be realistic. This is what our goal is. And then you make adjustments accordingly to meet the profit goal. So sometimes that means adding something here, taking away something there. So that you're basically reverse engineering how you're going to end up over here.
Right. So Donna, let me ask you, you used the term, you want to do this prior to the end of the year, right? Well, at the time of this recording, we're halfway through the year. Is it too late to create a budget? Am I screwed?
Oh, no, not at all. You can start a budget anytime, because you could still save this year. You might not hit what you originally were thinking back in January. Well, I want to do 10 million bucks this year. Well, if it's halfway through and you're only at 3 million, you've got a lot of ground to make up. However, you can still, make a difference and put yourself on track, start building those processes and, doing that function to still, I guess, improve your year and where it's going to end. So it's never too late. I start budgets in the middle of, the year all the time with clients, because, you don't bring new clients on at the beginning of the year. You bring them on throughout the year. Well, that's the first thing we talk about is, where's your budget? Let's check it out. And I look at their P&L and we identify areas that need to be looked at. Because often, on top of a budget, you've got things that come out, that they don't even know are wrong. Counts are wrong. They're claiming expenses that aren't actual expenses. Example would be an employee side of federal withholding, or they're federal withholding, but Social Security and Medicare. So you've got the two different sides. I've seen books where they're writing off garnishments. Well, it's not the company's garnishment, it's the employee's garnishment. So things like that are affecting your numbers.
Right.
Simple things, right? So
it's a good exercise to go to and start to bring the reality to the surface. So I like that. So Donna, you use this big word, inventory control. What the heck is an inventory control?
So inventory control, inventory, if you're looking at, your financial statements, inventory is considered an asset. Okay. So when you're purchasing inventory, and this kind of flows into cash, right? So when you purchase your inventory, you're moving liquid cash, which is, monies that you have readily available in your bank account, and you're turning it into a hard asset. So when you make that shift into inventory, then you have to sell the inventory or create it, depending upon what your inventory is. You either have to manufacture your product or you have to sell the product in order to convert it back into cash. Right. So when I say control your inventory, it's like you need to be aware of, what your inventory turnover is, which items to accurately stay on top of, your high ticket items that move quick, or your lower selling items that kind of sit on the shelf for a long time. Well, that's money just sitting there. So you really want to stay in control of, what is in there, so that you're not putting money into, your whatchamacallit product. Can't think of a product name, but so let's, if you're, you're Dairy Queen and your new, what is that thing that they've got that's new? It's some sort of flavored ice cream deal that's like it's not chocolate or the strawberry one. It's some new one. It's like fruity. Well, if it's not a huge seller, don't be putting that in your inventory. Stock up on chocolate. The chocolate dip cones. Everybody loves those. So that's kind of an example. So you want to make sure of what materials are needed. So number one, you don't run out, but number two, you're not overstocked, so that your cash is sitting there invested in something that is useless unless you sell it. Right. So one of the ways that you can do that is start off by doing an annual inventory audit. Most manufacturers do this on at least an annual basis, so that they know kind of, making sure that the computer ties out with what's actually in physical inventory. So they'll do that physical inventory annually, if not, more. Tells you what you have in inventory right now. And then you can use your sales data, pulling those reports on, what items are moving the quickest, what are the biggest sellers, what items are sitting and we're not selling much of. And so you'll identify again how much inventory you have versus, what you think you need to buy. So it's being proactive about understanding what you need to buy versus just buying it, because it's using up your liquid cash.
Right.
So let me give you an example. Here's an example with a client that I have that was, part of their, every company has like these leaky buckets, right? And so you've got, well, where's all my money going? Why do we have these expenses? What can we do to reduce, our outgoing cash? So I have a client and they're in the pool industry, and they weren't doing inventory. They weren't super huge. They're not super huge, but it's still important to have some sort of an inventory, present, so that you can kind of track, well, what's going on. One of the things that they were seeing that were expensive, relatively expensive, and there was just no accountability for, were these things called hammerheads. And these hammerheads help the guys clean the pools. So they're like $30 a piece, and they're reusable for a set number of times, or, depending upon how well they're cared for. It can last for several jobs, but they were walking out and they were just walking out the door and being used excessively. So, basically what it comes down to when you're really digging into that kind of stuff is, your crew just wasn't paying attention. So they were just fly out of the back of the truck, or, they leave them at the site, or they rip it because they're not being careful. So, just having that awareness and being more accountable also helps, with things like that, so that there's not so much usage, which means you're buying fewer. So your consumables are lasting longer and they're not having to be replaced as soon. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of savings here and there, but that's just like a small example. So they would get blown out of the, out the back of the truck, and, are getting left behind, damaged. They just weren't being careful. So, we've been able to reduce that number, which has helped them, with consumables. So, which is good. We also set up a better control system of that inventory for the hammerheads, so that they actually have to be, I'll call it, checked out, so that the owners know when somebody is getting a new one. Right. So it's a little bit more of accountability to, well, what happened to the one I just gave you last week? Oh, well, it blew out the back of the truck. So it can be used as a small training issue, brings awareness to, the employees on, well, this is costing a lot of money. If you could be, watchful of that, that would be super helpful. There's other ways that you can do it, like putting in, a little bit of bonus, something or other, to, little competitions, or, some sort of a bonus for, helping the company reduce expenses, and then, giving them, something that would be of interest to them, or something like that. So one of the other things with the pool company is the chemicals. And so the chemicals were being used more than normal. And so trying to understand, why they were going through so much, and what that ended up coming down to was training. So we implemented a little bit more training, and so then we also moved into a stock the truck for the week, based on the number of pools. So let's say that each person cleans 75 pools a week.
Right.
Okay. So there's a set number of, basically, like an average of what you would use per pool. And so basically that was how they would load the truck with the inventory for the week. And if you go out of that, significantly or whatever, then it's, well, let's take a look at why that is. So it gives you a little bit more accountability, again, with if somebody's being just, lackadaisical about treating a pool, you're using more chemicals than you need to because you didn't do this over here. So that's, two things that come to mind as examples that I can give you about, inventory and how you can control it. Well, I guess 3 examples, doing your inventory, and taking a look at, what are some high ticket items that can be better managed, and just, and implementing a little bit of accountability to help to control those costs, because all of it is coming off that bottom line. All of it is eroding that 12% that you're trying to get to. So, it actually improves your, your gross profit, because your cost of goods sold is less. So your gross profit line is better, also. So one other example I'll give to you is I spent many years in the transportation industry. And so a lot of the carriers that have, a certain number of trucks, and let's say they've got 15 trucks, so it benefits them to have their own maintenance department. Right. A lot of them will stock up on parts and supplies that they might need, which is fine. But, you can also, control those just the same way that you would, ABC part over here at pool, at a pool company, like chlorine or something. So, just kind of take a look at, well, how often do you change oil? If you're keeping a maintenance log, when does this one due? When does this one due? And you can pre-plan, but not plan so far in advance that you have all of this inventory sitting on the shelf waiting for the truck to need it, right?
Yes.
So that's a really good way, because I mean, those things are expensive. And as oil costs go up, and we won't get into that conversation. those are extremely costly. The costs are going up. So it's eroding your cash even more. And again, that cash isn't coming back. The only way that cash is coming back is if the truck keeps running and, you're bringing in revenue that way. So that is an expense. That's just a plain expense. No return there. So,
okay. I hope you guys heard what Donna really kind of brought to the surface here. This is why they call her the profit queen, right? It started with a budget, and then Donna led into questions. And a lot of the questions were why, how come, and what if. So reviewing the budget, once she reviewed the budget with her clients, asked questions, look what came from it. Additional training was needed, right? And an improvement on a process, and at times even a process developed. So we're not talking about, at least with Donna, when she says do a budget, she doesn't just do the budget with a thumbs up, go get them. She uses the budget to dig deep into really enhancing your revenue. So, I harp on this all the time. Don't wait. Okay. Even if you've already had a budget created and it just kind of sits there, get in touch with her. All right. You can see you see what she's done with some of this stuff just from a budget perspective, and being able to dig deep and even finding out, are we tracking the right things that we should be tracking? So wise words from the profit queen herself. So, well, Donna, let me ask you, okay, what about the eternal battle of company debt versus cash? Is there a winner or not?
That's a good one. I like this one. They're different mindset, they have a different viewpoint of how they're looking at stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So this is like the never ending, Democrat versus Republican, debt versus cash, So
nailed it.
Yeah. So let's say I'm trying to prep for this potential recession. Okay.
Right.
So you probably already heard me before say cash is king. Cash is always king. It doesn't matter whether we're in a recession or not. There is a such thing as a healthy debt, because it helps your credit, your credit, and you're building credit and you're wanting to have and maintain that.
Right.
So as funny as it sounds, to have some debt is always a good thing, but it needs to be healthy. And it needs to have just that right balance, right? So cash is always king. And so the question comes up, should I focus on paying down debt or increasing my cash reserve? So if we're going into a recession, and we're just going to play on that at the moment, the first thing that I would suggest a person do is look at the credit lines. Okay. And so the credit line, and a lot of companies use these just to function on operations, on a monthly basis. So you're going to use those, but you use it for a short term. So operating costs, right? In the transportation industry, if you're a broker, you usually wait up to 30 days for your client to pay you the revenue for, your services and for the freight, right?
Right.
But typically they pay their carriers quicker. Case in point would be a factoring company. They're fronting all the money and then they're waiting for payment. So there's an accordion effect that happens. So the credit line is used on a temporary basis to help function the organization's, operational, expenses until that money comes in. And then when the money comes in, you pay back the line, right? So it's like a daily thing. If you're watching your cash balance, you've got your deposits, your outs, things that are going out, you can manage it on a daily basis. so that you're paying little interest, but, you just use it for those short-term operating costs. All right. So it can also include, rent, payroll, those are things that you would want to use a credit line for. And again, let me stress, short term. It's not to carry a balance on for a long, long time. You don't want to get into that habit. So don't try to use it to, I'm going to go out and buy a new backhoe, or I'm going to go out and buy a $200,000 brand new truck because it gets 6 miles to the gallon instead of 5. You don't want to use it for stuff like that. So that would go into, watching your debt to income, and having your budget, and, using a worst case scenario, trying to, just kind of look ahead. Well, what if this happened? What if this happened? Can we still make our payments? So, you want to look at that. So as your accounts receivable come in, again, you can pay back the credit line. So, you consider the credit line, you want to consider, let's say you have a $200,000 credit line. You might look at increasing it. So go to the bank and talk to them about increasing the line now before the recession, or at the beginning of a recession versus later, because the credit will tighten up, because the banks are going to get stingy with their money. So they'll cut the lines. So often they'll cut the lines to reduce their own exposure. And they're less apt to increase the credit line during a recession, because again, it increases their exposure. So in the recession, cash is king. So unless you're a company like the size of Microsoft, paying down debt and increasing cash at the same time is, it can be kind of difficult, right? Yeah. So in my opinion, and how I run my own business, I'd be very leery to deplete my cash just prior to a recession, or even period, because I just more comfortable having that comfort zone of having liquid cash, that is, if something comes up, that I've got that, and I don't have to worry about, trying to sell something or whatever to recoup, and have that liquidity back. So I'll say this, and then I'll stop talking. So, ask yourself, can I handle the terms of my debt now? And if the answer is yes, then just stay with what you have. So, if the recession hits, if you can afford it now, then kind of leave it alone, right? But then, if the recession comes in and things change and kind of go south, then you can look at trying to renegotiate the terms of the debt to make it a bit more manageable. And banks are more apt to do things like that versus extending more credit. They'll look at, trying to help, the existing debt and your ability to pay it back. Right.
So again, guys, I know Donna harps on a budget. She harps on the numbers. I harp again on Donna is extremely familiar with this area, not just in good times, but in bad times. So for all of these reasons, if you haven't created a budget, or let's say you've created a budget, you've got your budget, you feel comfortable with your terms, contact her anyhow, get a second pair of eyes on what you're doing, because she has a very unique way of looking at things from an angle that maybe you haven't considered before. Now, and as the business leader, like I said, it is on us to prepare for some eventualities as much as we can. And even if that means bringing in an expert in a different field that we're not 100% comfortable with, or even if we've got solid people, get a second look. Objective point of view with Donna. I've seen her pull some crazy things off where I've given her clients, I said, Donna, I think this is hopeless. And she's come back just, maybe 48 hours later. Well, Mike, did you think about this? Mike, did you ask him that? What about this? What about that? And that's where she's really worked some miracles. So reach out to her. All right. I tell you what, because here's something else to consider as you're planning for these things, potential things. Remember, your employees are counting on you to do this. Your vendors are counting on you to do this. And as we've talked about banks, as Donna pointed out, increase the credit line now. In the eventuality that we do head into a recession, you can always renegotiate fixed term loans that you've got right now. When the recession gets back, she's giving you a way of how banks view these sort of things. These individuals are counting on you as the leader of the organization to have the company prepared to do this. Give her a call, right? Now, remember, when it comes to strategy, and some of my strategy sessions have gone a little bit longer, the mid review, because a strategy, a recession, it's no reason to abandon the strategy. You need to come back to your strategy on a consistent basis, review it, make adjustments. Don't throw it out. Don't discard it. A company without a strategy is absolutely rudderless, because more than ever, you're going to need something to come back to. Your organization needs a focus point on how you're going to be moving through some of these things. Review your mission. All right. Remind yourself, remind your team why your organization exists. Get them focused as to why you exist. A strong mission in difficult times should really rally people around the organization, coming up with ideas to get through it. Talk about your culture. All right. Look, everyone's got a great culture in good times, but your true culture, remember your culture, it's how we work together, how we work through difficult problems together, how we overcome obstacles. That's your culture. All right. And your real culture comes to the surface during difficult times, not just in good times. You've got to come back, talk about your culture. Guys, here's who we are. This is who we are. Are we behaving in this manner? Continue to get your employees and yourself looking beyond the difficult times. Guys, I know we're in this difficult time right now, but remember, we're going to come out of this. And when we do, we want to be closer to this point in our plan than farther away. A lot of organizations, they kind of get leaders, they kind of shut down, right? A little bit like I mentioned earlier. A little bit of panic sets in, and you start trying to figure out ways to come out of it. Some people, when we go through a recession, we want to take a look at a couple of things. The products, the services that we're offering. Donna talked about inventory that's invested in products and services. If it's a product, you can't get your cash out of that particular product until it's off the shelf. During a recession, it may take longer to move. Also, during difficult times of recession, you might have to consider which products, services are profitable, which are not. You might have to take a really hard look at postponing, discontinuing certain products or services during a recession. But you have to kind of take a balanced look at this. There's two definitions I want to get clear here on this before I talk about this next point. There's innovation, all right, and then there's improvements. Now, to me, innovation means to create something new to your market, something big, all right, which means large capital investments. Donna just got done talking about who's king. Improvement to me means small incremental adjustments, not as much cash investment. Ask yourself, as we could potentially be moving into a recession. We have some economists who say we are, we have some who say not so, not right now. But you got to ask yourself, is innovating, remember the definition, something new, big launch, is this the time to be turning our cash and our attention to that? At the same time, we need to make improvements to some of our profitable products and services that we have now, because if we don't improve on some of these things, competition will. And during the recession, then we find out who's really the king, right? So if a recession hits, this, might not be the best market conditions to introduce, an innovative product to the market. So I want to stress with you that as we go through these times, you need to be proactive. Develop a plan. It's not too late. I've onboarded a couple of clients this year. This past month, I've onboarded a couple of clients. I'm kind of thinking back some of the things that we went through. They didn't have a strategy. We created something to help them through this year. So it's not too late to do some of these things. It's never too late to do a lot of these things. So, that's kind of what we wanted to part with you guys in this particular segment, preparing for a potential recession. Your customers, employees, even your vendors, your bankers, they're depending on you to do it and not wait for something that could happen. Again, our guest has been the Profit Queen herself, Donna Febus, virtual CFO at Temple Executive Coaching. We want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this segment, hey, please do us a favor. Subscribe, share with others. Until the next time, guys, thank you so much. I'm Mike Temple with Business Leadership Experts. That's the Profit Queen, Donna Febus. Well, thanks for watching that last segment. So how can Temple Executive Coaching help you? Well, there's basically 4 ways. 1, subscribe to our channel and click on the notification bell so that you know when we put out a new video. Number 2, we help you to create an effective strategy to help answer the most important strategic questions to give your organization an edge over your competition in your market. Number 3, we help to develop your leadership pipeline's mental fitness and their self-awareness so that they can execute on their most important objectives. And last, we help to strengthen your cash flow management and your financial position. Now, to learn more, set up an appointment. Email us at info@templeexecutivecoaching.com.